Welcome back everyone here in Lough Erne Resort and also everyone watching virtually as well. You're very welcome back. We are now into the session 4, the talk of the catchment, and this will bring us up to lunch. So we're going to talk for the next half an hour or so. I would again just encourage you just to check your phones and check that they're off, and also remind you of the hashtag. It's hashtag source to tap 2022 if you're using it. So I'm going to sit down here and change microphones. And I'm going to introduce you to the guests that we have. I'm delighted to say that we have a really good panel here for a bit of a discussion about the issues on the ground. So when I call out your name, maybe you could just raise your hand. Allister Spence, Water Supply Plant Manager, Northern Ireland Water. Domhnall Kennedy, Agricultural Sustainability Support Advisor in Teagasc. We have Nancy McGlinchey, Donegal Landowner. Patrick McSorley, Agricultural Supplier and Contractor. And finally, Terence Henry, Technologist, Greenmount Campus, College of Agriculture, Food and Rural Enterprise. And it most certainly isn't finally, because we've also got Lisa Stewart, who is Source to Tap Project Officer as well. So we've got a really good lineup here to be able to explore some of the really interesting issues that have emerged in the last while. Nancy, it feels fitting to start with you as a landowner. I mean, I wonder, first of all, in the last session we heard about the surprise that farmers didn't know about the issue of MCPA, and I suppose also just the extent of spend and effort it takes to take it out of the water. For you, did you relate to that? Was it something that farmers spoke about or not?
Yes, we would have related to that because we didn't hear about it in the beginning. It was only through local media that we've heard about it in the beginning. You know, so I suppose advertising is good, you know, in any way to advertise all these for farmers, you know.
So that kind of awareness raising was helpful. Yeah,
it was, yes.
Yeah.
To get farmers interested, and I suppose farmers are slow to sort of go into schemes and in case they don't know what they're going into. You know, so it's harder to get them motivated.
Yes, yeah. And I suppose for you, I mean, what was it that made you decide to get involved?
Well, I suppose being 100% grant and being 100% getting the money back again and investing any investment in farm or in, you know, is good. It's a good idea or any improvement in farms and more education and, you know, for us is a good thing.
And just tell us a little bit about your land and what kind of measures you took.
Well, our farm is an outlying farm, and it's, you know, so for us, we fenced off the stream, and that made the farm more secure, and then put in a solar water system that made sure that you had clean water for your stock at all times. And I suppose the cutting the rushes and weed wiping them and made a vast improvement to our land, and that, you know, in that way sort of thing.
And would you say, Nancy, that I mean, we had that question before the break, which was, you know, I suppose the level to which farmers need to be informed about the data itself. You know, is that something that you would welcome? Is it something that you feel would be helpful to you in the future in terms of how you manage your land?
Yes, more information and getting them involved, and maybe more meetings, more local meetings that you would, you know, get them maybe in local places where they're more inclined to come to meetings, you know, and let them understand what is happening, you know, and what you are prepared to do and to help them. And I suppose form filling and all that, farmers are afraid of all that.
Yes.
You know, as well.
So keeping it as straightforward.
Yes,
I mean, I think all of us can understand that. Not too much paperwork is always a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah. I suppose as well, it's the nature of anything to do with water that it inherently connects all of us, doesn't it? It's the thing that weaves in and out of our lives together. So for your farming colleagues in your area as well, was it something that you spoke about? Was it something that was discussed?
I suppose, yes, we did, making sure that, you know, all the water is trying to do our best to keep the water clean and keep the streams from being damaged and, you know, having clean drinking water, you know, for all the animals and, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And beside you there, Patrick McSorley. Patrick, you're a contractor. You work with farmers, for farmers, on things like fencing and all the rest. Talk to us a bit about your experience of working with farmers in the scheme.
It was a good scheme. Lisa and them come out and they done out the plan, and then the farmer came to people like me, and we met the farmer, went to the ground, seen the best things to do for the farmer and what he wanted done, and done it, and it was prompt payment. You know, the farmer paid fairly quick because he wanted to get his money back, and the scheme worked very well.
Yeah, that works well. What, Patrick, if anything, has changed since you started to become involved in, I suppose, through the farmers in this project? I mean, in your other work outside of farmers involved in the project, has it changed the way you look at the work that you do?
Yeah, I didn't understand MCPA, how bad it was and how much it cost to get it out of the water down the Derg treatment works, and didn't realise a few drips could do as much damage, and a lot of farmers didn't understand it. And I'm a farmer myself, and we fenced off a stream, we weed wiped the rushes, and it was a meadow and there's 12 acres in it, and it was useless last year, and this year we lammed 80 ewes in it. They couldn't get into the water, and great advantage. Like.
So it stimulated action on your own farm as a result of it. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in some ways the idea that knowledge is everything, knowledge is the biggest influencer. Once you understand these things, once you're told about them, once you get the data, then you'll sort of change the ways, change the methods that you use.
Yeah, and we weed wiped for farmers last year, and they're back this year looking about getting weed wiping done again, because the farmers realise that if they keep using the MCPA, it'll be banned. And I don't mean keep using it, but keep abusing it maybe. It'll be banned, and then I don't know what'll happen to the rushes.
And on that point, I mean, do you think, we heard from before the break that question, that if the policy changes about land eligibility, do you think that farmers overnight would say, okay, fine, we're not using it at all?
One of the last speakers said that some ground probably will be let go, but rushes will grow anywhere if the ground's not used, and fertiliser has got more expensive, so you know farmers will still have to
deal with
rushes. Yeah.
Lisa, there's a question that has just come in, and I just wonder if you can answer it. How can we engage with the farmers who were not involved in the scheme? Interesting one. So I know, you know, by necessity you worked with the ones that were, but any understanding of how or what they were looking for that they decided not to get onto the scheme?
Well, I suppose when the message gets out there that it was a success and it was 100% funded, we had a lot of farmers approached us after the scheme saying, could we get work done now? So it was by seeing the work that was done and how successful it was, maybe there's a little bit of regret that some people didn't apply to it. So I suppose it's taking the learns from this and knowing that if a scheme comes up in the area again, that if we take this approach and we, advisor-led again, then it'll be a really easy and simple process for them to apply again.
So that's really interesting, that actually the idea presumably was that they would have heard about it, but maybe had some concerns, or because it was new, didn't quite know where it would lead. Yeah. But I suppose the proof is in the pudding, and therefore once their peers did it, there was a willingness perhaps to jump in.
Yeah, it took engaging with, like, every catchment has a farmer that's a bit of a character. Everyone listens to them. I would say Patrick McSorley is that man in the catchment. So once Patrick heard the message and spread it, I think you have to lean on established contacts in the catchment. Not saying make them spread the message for you, but if you get one useful contact, it's nearly better than having a wee meeting in a community hall that no one hears about.
So
Word of
Patrick,
mouth.
you're like that drop of MCPA in the water. It just goes over. So that's fantastic to hear. And I suppose there's a huge amount of learning in that for anyone doing similar projects around other areas, which is in some ways identify not the leaders in the community, but the people who are trusted, make sure that the right people are talking about it so that there is that kind of initial trust there with farmers.
Yeah, and it's hard to start out in the project area. We were like an unknown entity in the catchment. So establishing networks like that and leaning on networks that are already existing. So the Ulster Farmers Union were very helpful at spreading the message for us. The farm business development groups. So any place where we could meet farmers that wasn't just us organising something was very useful. So I would recommend that for future projects. Just lean on the networks that are already there.
Terence, can I come to you? I mean, you've been involved in supporting the team, the Source to Tap team, on promoting best practice in farmers. I mean, what do you think the biggest sort of advice that you gave was the most important piece of advice at the start of these projects? As Lisa was saying, they come as a team. No one necessarily knows them. Farmers have to learn to trust them and learn to believe that what they're saying is good for their farm and their land.
Well, we, through CAFRE, we delivered a number of on-farm courses here on rush control. So that was our input, and it was most important they were on-farm. And I was a trained teacher, so I knew the most important thing was to have a mind-capturing introduction. So the first thing we did was to just dig up some rushes and explain a bit about the biology of soft rush, because there are a number of different types of rush. So we explained a wee bit about that. And then I think the second most important thing was to have a variety of activities for them to be involved in. So we had boards, at various plots on rush control showing the effectiveness of that particular treatment on controlling of rushes. And then we had a pesticide storage unit on display. Patrick here was involved in doing a demonstration of weed wiping, though I do point out we used water. Water was dispensed from the weed wiper, not glyphosate. And then, so all this variety of activities. And the most important thing, I think, was to get the farmers and landowners talking among themselves. Because I learnt more from them, much more from them. I couldn't talk about weed wiping with the same effectiveness as Patrick here, because he's doing it day in, day out. We handed over, we empowered them. And I think the most important answer to your question, it's a rather long-winded answer, but the most important thing was to let them engage in what Mark Horton talked about earlier, knowledge transfer. Because they will always learn more from each other. So we didn't treat them as passive learners. They were actively involved in their own learning. And I think there were very, very meaningful learning gains. And the one thing I took away from it was that everybody involved had a very positive response to make to the training program. And the feedback that we got in the evaluation was positive, that they'd learned from us and hopefully learned from each other.
We've had a question here, I don't know whether you can answer it. Are there any non-pesticide solutions to rush?
Well, that suggests that the only solution is herbicide, which is not the case. To effectively control rush, you have to use a range of strategies. So, for example, weed wiping with glyphosate, we've seen from the conference here this morning that that's quite effective in reducing the MCPA load by about 24%. But a whole suite of measures need to be considered when controlling rush. For example, correct drainage of the soil. The drainage has to be repaired, possibly, or maybe in some cases new drainage. The soil is of the correct pH. So lime may need to be applied to bring the pH up to about 6. The soil fertility is right. The P&K levels are at the right indices. And lastly, to avoid poaching, or heavy machinery on the soil over the winter months, because that creates conditions for the rush seeds, which can last in the soil which can persist for up to 60 years in the soil. And if you poach the soil with cattle or sheep over the winter, then these rush seeds get the perfect niche to germinate. So it's not just a simple, using herbicide to control rush. There's a whole range of things. I was reading there recently that, properly managed grass sward will always outcompete rushes. Now, isn't that interesting? If the grass sward is dense, isn't poached, lime kept, as I say, without repeating myself, it'll always outcompete the rush, the soft rush.
I mean, it sort of relates to another question, just briefly, if you can. On the marginal rushy ground that requires MCPA, was there any exploration of different land use options, such as woodland planting? I suppose the idea is that you then incentivize farmers, you perhaps give subsidies for alternative use on those areas.
Yes, I will be brief here. A riparian zone with trees planted in it, and the beauty of that is that the roots in the trees will actually help to open up the soil, so filtration is better, so you can get the same runoff. And secondly, the roots will absorb nitrates and phosphates that get deep into the soil horizon. So the roots go deeper, so you have benefits from removing nutrients and also better filtration, so there's less chance that herbicides will leak into watercourses.
Allister, at the end here, can I come to you? You were at the stage of abstracting the water. What changes have you seen, if any, since the project began in terms of the quality of the water? I mean, we've heard a bit about turbidity before the break as well. Can you talk a little bit about that from your perspective?
We're starting to see the water quality improving coming into the works. It's easier to treat and less sludge production at the end. And with the result going forward, that'll mean that we won't have to regenerate our primary and secondary filters as often. So there'll be a cost reduction there for Northern Ireland Water.
Which, as we heard before, is part of the assessment, the economic assessment as well. Are you surprised, Allister, at this mention that farmers, didn't fully understand, didn't have that information, shall we say, about MCPA and, about the harm it does, but also, I suppose, the cost of filtering it out at your end?
No, I'm not surprised at all. I actually run a wee men's club, which I took the men's club to the waterworks one night, and they were all mostly farmers. They weren't all farmers, and they didn't understand what we'd done in the treatment plant. They thought that the water come out and run through a bit of sand and added chlorine. Because that's what they see on the TV. There's wee filter. It's not explained, and we explained it all through. And they're actually amazed at what we had to do and how we treated the water, and explained it all to them. And they left all, thinking that they would look after things a bit better than they had been before. And we've had a couple of farmers' visits like that, or in the Derg as well. And most people have left saying didn't realise that this is what you had to do.
So I'm thinking now about the potential for a tour of a water purification plant, a treatment plant, to give people that information. I mean, I think the rest of us in particular, but farmers, specifically in this case. I mean, do you think those sort of things would be beneficial?
Yep, definitely. And I just mentioned it there a few minutes ago. Children, I was just saying that a point was maybe missed. There was earlier that they asked what were farmers' fears, and one of the farmers said his fear was his children, because they were educated by the Source to Tap team on what they should be doing, and the children were actually coming home and saying, "Daddy, what are you doing? Do you know? Are you doing weed wiping? Are you spraying? Or he was scared of his children."
Which is the most amazing motivator for action, I can tell you.
We're all motivated for our children and want to do the best we can for them. So I think the education has been brilliant, and more visits. Now, I know with COVID, visits around the treatment plants were sort of stopped, but we're looking forward to them coming back and educating both adults and children. But I think the children are the important thing, people to be educating, because they'll take it home.
Yes.
And they will say, you can't be doing this.
And they'll moan and they'll moan and they'll moan.
Yep.
And that's great.
It's children that have pushed the recycling, so they could push the weed wiping as well.
Yeah, yeah. Domhnall, can I come to you? Can you, I think it must be very interesting for you to hear how things have gone up here. Can you briefly for people, and I'm sure everyone does know what ASAP is, but just briefly for people, just describe ASAP and the work that you do?
Yes, Ella. I'm involved with the Agricultural Sustainability Support and Advisory Programme. It's a new collaborative initiative by the government and industry in Ireland. It started in 2018, ran until 2021, and now it has been extended to December 2027. It focuses on free support and advisory support to farmers, focusing on mitigation measures improving water quality. Now, it is focused on what we call priority areas for action. There's approximately 190 in Ireland. The thing that's come across from source to tap is it's confidential, and similarly the ASA programme is confidential, and that's very important to the farmer. Currently there's 20 Teagasc advisors and 10 dairy co-op advisors supporting the programme, and underneath the current programme for government there's an additional 10 advisors to put in place.
And how easy or difficult is it, Domhnall, to have that engagement with farmers when, in your case under ASAP, you don't have the incentives, the financial incentives that Source to Tap have had to be able to get that sort of change in the way in which they farm to the benefit of water?
I suppose I've been involved on the steering committee of this, and you get to learn what is important and how to you learn from their experiences as how to get these mitigation measures adopted. As you are correct, we have no funding involved for putting mitigation measures in place. The likes of fencing water courses and putting alternative drinking sources in place are not taken up readily, mainly due to the capital cost that's involved with putting these mitigation measures in place. But collaborating with projects like Source to Tap that have the funding to do to put these mitigation measures in place, I find is very important. I see a couple of groups down there that I would have been involved with in Ireland. The ASAP measures, by and large, that have been taken up by farmers within the PAs that we're working in have been mainly land management measurements that are of small cost or no cost to the farmer, but they're mutual beneficial to both improving water quality and farmer sustainability. The mitigation measures I'm talking about we're looking at critical source areas and how to manage them, putting buffer margins in place, and the most importantly has been alluded to here in the previous talks is nutrient use efficiency.
Yes.
I suppose just to finish up on what we're talking about, what we've seen in the ASA programme now, the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage have put in place an EIP project of 60 million in place. The
European Innovation Partnership project.
Yes,
yeah.
Project. They're putting it in place to fund the cost of putting the mitigation measures that I've talked about there in the likes of fencing water courses and introducing solar power pumps for alternative drinking supplies. And that hopefully will be up and running in 2023, roughly over a 5-year period. They're talking about 12 million a year to help cover the cost. Farmers will be able to reapply to cover the cost for putting in those mitigation.
Okay, so the next phase might be then including the kind of incentives that have been available to Source to Tap, financial incentives.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nancy, what what would be your advice in terms of the best way to reach farmers and get their trust for these kind of projects? I mean, we have a question here, what type of media do farmers prefer for engagement and things like that? But
well, I suppose local radio, anything local, local communities, anything local really, because our word of mouth, farmers talk to each other, they inform each other about things that are happening or, in their area, or, I think you have to stay local really.
Patrick, I presume you'd agree. Yeah. We've had a nice comment there. Great to hear from local farmers. It has been fantastic to see the Derg cross-border catchment being shown as such a positive example for others. Will DERA or DAFM use the learnings from this project in future agricultural schemes? We don't have anyone on the panel who can answer that. I just wonder, Domhnall, designing it from source, designing the incentives. I mean, we heard again about the idea of don't provide the incentive to use MCPA from the start, and then you can deal with the rest of it because it won't be such a problem. I suppose that has to be part of the solution in the future.
It does. It has to be part of the solution. But I suppose if you were listening to what's coming through about the land incentive scheme here, is the importance of the Ag Advisor, the importance of Lisa here to encourage the success of it. Like everything that we're looking at, a holistic approach has to be taken from an agricultural end to the farm to encourage the success of these mitigation measures. We talk about the buy-in of the farmers. The important thing is listen to what they want to do, and can we come together with a solution that's, as I say again, mutual beneficial to both water quality and farmer sustainability. What Mark Horton alluded to there earlier, and what I'm finding in Ireland is farmers don't want and are trying their best to improve the water quality, and the support of the farm organisations is very important. The collaboration of everyone within the community is important to see the success of these projects going forward.
The point that he made, that farmers don't want to pollute. I mean, that's not what they wake up in the morning thinking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lisa, just to end with you, if there's any questions, please let me know, and we'll wrap up. To end with you, I mean, you're one of the advisors, presumably, that was contacted on the weekends and everything. That sense of connection, community, you being a source of information and trusted advice, seems to be at the heart of all of this. Without that, you haven't really got any project at all, have you?
No, that was key to it. I think being from a farming background helps things too. You can go out and you can be quite relatable. It's not someone coming on the ground to boss you. I think sometimes with other schemes, if someone's coming out, it's either an inspection or you've done something wrong, and I suppose the perception of someone coming onto your farm has always been negative from the outset, but I suppose Source to Tap has changed that. You come out and it was advisor-led, but it was also you listening to the farmer, what they would like. So we produced the water environment management plans, but it wasn't, this is what we want you to do. It was, would you like to do these things? So that you could adapt it, that it would suit them more so. So yeah, listening is probably a key skill, and being approachable and being contactable, so you can lift the phone at any time and advise in that sense. So
How late was the phone call that you ever got?
Oh well, I got a Sunday one time, but no, they're not too bad. But that you have to be like that, because a farmer doesn't work 9 to 5; they're working 24/7. So when they get a minute to phone you, they'll phone you. So no, you don't mind that.
And finally, you're from a farming background. Has it changed the way you look at the way you farm?
Well, Daddy wouldn't listen to me that much, but I was telling him going to this conference. He's going, "What's that about?" And I was like, "From 5 years working on this," and he's like, "Sure, we have the weed wiper at home too. I could have done a bit of that work." So, I don't know if the penny has dropped yet, but I'm always nagging them to do things a wee bit better. So,
you'll get there eventually.
I will. Yeah, another 5 years.
Well, listen, we're gonna wrap up for lunch. So lunch is in the Lochside restaurant. So you go out of the main entrance of the Ross Suite and you turn left. You walk about 30 metres and venue staff will be there on hand. And if I could just ask you all to be back here, aim to be back here 1:50, 1:55. We can get settled and get going then at 2 o'clock. But most importantly, please put your hands together to thank the panel for a really good session. Thank you.